Hello crafty friends, I'm Lien from Studio Kato and I'm so glad you're joining me again today. Today I'm so happy to be joining Crafty Meraki in the Instagram hub showcasing their new release. So be sure to check out Instagram as well to see plenty of inspiration with the new products. I started by die cutting a bunch of the floral dies from this release out of Canson Montval 200 GSM watercolor cardstock. I kept all of the Diecuts in their negative spaces and adhered them on the back with some purple tape to keep them in place, and this makes it really easy to color them. And I'm not at all being too fussy with the coloring. I'm doing it really quickly, directly with the Karin markers onto the paper. I'm not using any water, so these do work without any blending markers or any water. They glide around perfectly on the paper, and it's really vibrant, the result you get. You also don't have to worry about your lighter markers being ruined by the darker colors or anything like that. You can just scribble them off onto a scrap piece of paper, and that will get rid of any of the darker color left on the lighter markers. For these large Rachel flowers, I am using a dark shade of orange, then blending that out with a dark yellow, and then finally using a lighter yellow even in the middle. Where I can, if I have the markers available to me, I am using 3 tones to add shading instead of 2, but for a lot of these spaces I am only using 2 markers because there aren't a lot of colors available in these markers. To add some more interest to the florals, I am just dotting on some little specks of color. I'm using my darkest orange shade for that, and I'll also be going in with the dark yellow shade as well. And the color underneath is still slightly wet, so this will fade out a little bit and be more subtle in the end. And these gorgeous red florals are the Spade dies by Crafty Meraki. I really love them because they are tall and thin, so they work really nicely in a bouquet. I tried to use 2 tones of green for all of my stems today because that adds just a little bit more interest and depth into those floral pieces. I'm using the same coloring method for all of these flowers. I just put down some color with my darkest marker, then my midtone if I have some, then the lightest shade, and then I go back in while the paint is still wet with my darkest or my midtone shade and add in some dotting. And this will just make sure that the blend isn't too smooth, because a blend that's too smooth sometimes looks a little bit uninteresting. And once all of these are colored, I will let them dry completely while I work on my background. And for my background, I cut the Craft Around mini Slimline die twice out of thick white cardstock, and I'm stacking those together. I really love this cover die. I am a sucker for geometric cover dies because you can do a lot of things with this. I already used this as a stencil, and I will again in this video, but it also makes for a great subtle white on white background like I'm doing here. So I'm just adhering that again with the Barely Art Precision Craft Glue onto my mini Slimline card base. I can then add some splatter with my Finetec paint, and this is a lovely copper or rose gold shade. It's really beautiful. I'm just swirling that pigment around with some water, and this just makes sure it is really nicely pigmented when I splatter it on my card. These Finetec paints have super great coverage if you let the paint sit a while with some water on it to activate. Now once the splatter is dry, I can assemble my little bouquet. Feeling like a florist today. I just put some foam tape behind the large Rachel flowers, and all of the other things I am just adhering down with some liquid glue. So I am placing that on my card. I did figure out the placement a little bit beforehand, so I knew where to place everything once my foam tape was on the back of them. And I'm just popping down some glue on that leaf to adhere it in place. I started with the largest flowers first because I knew exactly where I wanted them to go, and then I can just arrange all of my smaller florals around that. I wouldn't normally glue these stems down from the large yellow flowers, but because I wanted the curve of the stem to be a little bit different than it actually is, I glued it in place so it had the curve I wanted. And then I'm also adhering those red flowers in place and shifting one underneath the large yellow flower. For these smaller flowers, I'm basically only adding glue at the bottom of the stem, so only that part is adhered down and all of the rest of it can flare up a little bit, and this will give a little bit of movement to the card and more dimension and interest. I also sometimes cut some parts of the stems off if they are too long, like I did with that final red flower. And like I also did with these blue flowers, I cut some of the flowers off and I will use those separately. So you don't have to use your die cuts as they come. You can alter them a little bit and that will make your card stand out. Now this is essentially a really simple card. The coloring didn't take me long at all. I think I only spent maybe 15 minutes coloring all of these flowers, and I also had some pieces left over. And assembling this is definitely the hardest part, but it's also the most fun part. But you also don't have to color these. If you want to save some time and you have a lot of colored cardstock, you can just use that. I don't have a lot of solid colored cardstock. I just have a lot of pattern paper that I don't use. So there are a lot of options with these dies, and I would love to see what you make with them. Now I'm folding a mini Slimline envelope using my We Are Memory Keepers 123 punch board and some pale yellow cardstock. I'm trimming down the bottom and top flap of this envelope because otherwise it wouldn't close, and I'm just using my paper trimmer for that. You just line up the score line with one of your centimeter marks and that will give you a straight cut. Now I just have to quickly assemble this with some Barely Art Precision Craft Glue, and then I can do a super easy design on the back of the envelope as well. I die cut that Craft Around mini Slimline die once more out of a really glossy cardstock. This is actually what you see now, the back of a piece of pattern paper, but I don't really like the pattern paper, and it's really glossy, so it's perfect for stenciling. You could also cut this out of acetate. That would probably hold up better over time, so you can use it over and over, but this cuts better and I have a ton of it lying around, so you'll probably see me doing this a lot in the future. And I'm just blending some inks through there that will match the yellow flowers I have on my card. I'm using some Pinkfresh Studio inks and I'll list the colors in the description box below. And that finishes up the envelope and the card for today. I really like how this card turned out, so bright and cheery, and I hope you like it too. If you did, make sure to leave a like on this video and leave your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to read them. Make sure you also check out the Instagram hub. I will leave all of the details about that in the description below, and you will love all of the card ideas the design team came up with. Of course, feel free to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of my videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.